Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Elaine Welteroth, and I'm so excited to be Zooming with all of you about one of the most important films I've seen in a long time, Judas and the Black Messiah. I am joined by legends and luminaries and creative innovators in their fields to talk about the impact that the Black Panthers have had on our culture, on fashion, on music. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like this is like one of the best panels today. I'm really honored that we get to dive into all of this together. And so let me set the stage for each of them. None of them need proper introductions, but let's just set the stage for them, for each of them. We have the legendary Chuck D with us, who again can go without introduction, but he's a globally recognized hip hop artist who's celebrated for bringing conscious rap to the forefront. We have Charlize Antoinette Jones with us, who's a visionary costume designer, and she worked on this film. And we also have the beautiful and prolific model and activist Ebony Davis. Hey everybody, how are you feeling? How are you?
Good.
Good.
Well, we are honored to be in your midst. I'm happy to share a Zoom with all of you guys. Let's dive right in. Charlize, let's kick it off with you because, I mean, your work in this film is incredible. I could not take my eyes off of the characters, even the extras. I mean, the styling, the wardrobe in this film is iconic. And it's truly authentic. So I would love to hear about your creative process and the research that went into bringing this Black Panther, aesthetic to life in such an authentic way.
Awesome. Yeah. So I did a ton of research. I started researching this film about a year out because the director and I are dear friends and creative collaborators. So anytime he's working on something, he lets me know because in his words, I'm his costume designer. So I started researching the movie about a year before we were greenlit. And I actually had already had a bunch of research about the Panthers because at the time I was doing a TV show that involved a time travel element. And we had a whole episode that featured Black Panthers. So I had done all this research about the Panthers in the 60s, and it was just serendipitous that he was working on a movie about Fred Hampton and the Illinois Black Panther Party. So for my research, I relied a lot on documentaries. There's the Vanguard documentary that everyone knows about, but there's also several documentaries about Chairman Fred. And also there was a group of French documentarians that were following him around during this time of him formulating the Rainbow Coalition and the Illinois chapter, establishing the Illinois chapter. So I got really lucky because everything looks authentic because I had a lot to pull from. I had all this documentary footage. A lot of journalists were shooting the party and the Rainbow Coalition during that time because it was an amazing thing that was happening. So, there's tons of images on Getty Images. So, I literally broke down people's wardrobe in these images and had my team go out and find the pieces because we sourced, like, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the clothing is actually from the 60s. We had a really short prep window. We had like 5 weeks to get this done. It was a lot going on. So, we sourced clothing from LA, we sourced clothing from, Cleveland and Cincinnati where we were shooting. We sourced clothing from various people down, various dealers down south. So it was an amazing like treasure hunt. And I was just so happy to be able to do this in this authentic way.
Mm-hmm. You killed it.
Thank you.
It's really incredible. I'd love to, before we move off of fashion, I would love to hear you speak to the ways in which fashion is political, because so many people kind of write off fashion as superficial. But especially in this era, when you're depicting this era, there was so much meaning and significance. And there was a story being told through fashion. So could you talk a little bit about the uniform behind the Black Panther Party and also how it evolved over time and the significance of that in terms of the message behind it?
Yeah. when I was doing my research, I found it very interesting that the Illinois Party had their own look. And, various chapters had their own versions of the uniform and own sets of rules as to what people could and couldn't wear. So, the images we're most familiar with of the Black Panther Party is of the Oakland chapter, and they have the powder blue shirts on, the leather jackets, sunglasses, and berets. Now, the reason why they wore leather jackets specifically was because it was something a lot of people had, already. And also they wore the sunglasses and with the jackets to kind of conceal their identities, for safety. And also the berets, as Huey P. Newton said, was the international symbol of revolutionaries. So, he said that people all over the world who were fighting in third world countries were wearing berets. And so they took up the beret as another part of the symbolism of being an international revolutionary. So the Illinois Party specifically, which was formed in late '68, they wore these camo green World War II jackets for a couple of reasons. One, it's what was readily available. Two, there was a lot of protests around the Vietnam War during that time. This is a highly political time. And three, to symbolize the fact that they were at war, that this country was at war with Black people. The Chicago police were at war with them. So that's what it was to symbolize. And they always took off the US Army patches. You'll never see them with the US Army patch on there. So it was a way of kind of like flipping this, so, you can send people, you can draft people, and the draft was huge too, right? So like this whole conversation around the drafts as well. So it's like, you can draft people to fight, in Vietnam, but there's also a war going on back home. So, they were kind of flipping all that symbolism on its head and making fashion revolutionary. And, and I think it inadvertently, all this stuff ended up looking cool, but I don't think that was like necessarily the original reason why they did it. It wasn't that they were trying to look cool. It was like, no, this is a uniform, because they have very specific protocols around dress. It's taken very, very seriously. It's a uniform. And also, like I said, to conceal people's identity.
Mm-hmm. Ebony, I want to bring you in here. Talk about your connection to this film, and also kind of your own revolutionary spirit, and how right now we see you rocking your fro, and it looks amazing, by the way. You've really become known in the fashion space for challenging the Eurocentric standard of beauty, and making space for us, for our natural hair. And so I'd love to hear you kind of just reflect on what the film meant to you as a model and as an activist in the fashion space.
For sure. Becoming an activist wasn't really a conscious decision for me. When I made the decision to go natural, it was really me grasping for some sort of autonomy, because I'd been in the industry for 7 years at that point, and I had my face, painted gray by makeup artists who didn't know what skin tone to use, or had my hair ripped out by hairdressers who didn't have the knowledge that they needed to style my texture of hair. And so I was really just grasping for something that gave me a little bit of agency over myself. And in doing that, I kind of got labeled an activist because I became very vocal about it. And I started to open up about the things I experienced. I did a TED Talk in 2017 called Black Girl Magic in the Industry. And I just shared, ever since I was a little girl, I remember being bombarded with all of these images of beauty, none of which represented me, and how that made me feel, how that affected my self-esteem, and how that made me look at myself. And so in going natural, I also thought to myself, what other beliefs am I carrying that are ruling the way that I live my life that I am not conscious of? Because if I had this belief about my hair and my beauty that I was not conscious of, that dictated how I move through this model space, then there must be other things, other programming that I'm holding onto that is determining how I'm functioning in this world. And so over the last 4 years since I did that TED Talk in 2017, I've really just been unpacking this colonial mindset, unpacking all of these beliefs that don't belong to me. And it's really led to this beautiful spiritual evolution that's just been all about me figuring out who I am authentically. Who am I outside of the beauty standards and the ideals and the imagination of someone else that does not that is not me, that does not belong to me? What does my imagination conceive of myself? And I think that's such an important thing to think about in this time of revolution, because I truly believe that now we are in a time of revolution as well, but it doesn't look the same as it did in the 60s and 70s. It's about our collective imagination. It's about what does freedom look like for ourselves? It's not going to look like berets and rifles. It's not going to necessarily look like marching in the streets. You know, it might look like rest. I've learned in quarantine that rest is revolutionary. As a Black woman, as a descendant of slaves, you know, we've never had the opportunity to just put our feet up and feel beautiful and pour into ourselves. And that is an act of revolution. That is an act of rebellion while living in a society that tells us that we must constantly be busy and constantly be working. So yeah, my hair was sort of this entry point, this tipping point into this just greater exploration of self. And I think we're at this point now where it's all about us collectively awakening to that consciousness. Who are we? How can we use our imagination to create the freedom that we desire?
All right, so Chuck D, we got to talk about Public Enemy, obviously. I would love to hear you talk about how the Black Power movement and the Black Panther Party specifically influenced the look and the sound of not just Public Enemy, but also hip hop music at large.
Well, first of all, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on this panel. And if you saw me look away, that's because my notepad is down there. And whenever Young Energy is doing his thing, I take notes. And to take notes, you know, and be cross-generational is really where it's at in the future. Big up to Sharice when she was talking about the wardrobe, you know, that whole aesthetic at that particular time, I grew up into that. I was born in 1960. So yeah, it was always that balance of, you know, what people were wearing, because we had statements just in the clothes that the average everyday person was wearing. And when it came down to the movements of Young Energy in the 60s and in the 70s, we got the message just by how people were bold enough to wear their clothes and their hair in defiance of the particular time. Now, you see, on my birth certificate, it says my government name and my race classification says Negro. In the first 10 years of the 60s, I went from being born as Negro, somewhere in the middle of the 60s, we were colored, because whenever we saw Black folk on TV, we'd be happy, like, ooh, colored people on TV. I'm 5 years old when the Civil Rights Bill gets passed. So in that period of time, the formation of the Black Panthers, of using the word Black, and Black wasn't a popular word to use even amongst Black people. They were like, well, when you talk Black, you got to really get serious. But this was a serious time where younger people said, you know, y'all turn the page, but the tipping point, we ain't going to take it no more. We're going to identify ourselves in this forward movement. So by the end of the 60s, all of a sudden, not only was we Black, but Black was all of a sudden beautiful. Ebony and Jet magazines is the magazines that we used to be able to get not only a timeline, but sort of like a GPS on what was happening outside your area that you grew up on. And so we had that. And also culturally, James Brown came out with Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. He had little white kids singing the song. So we were like, yo, Black is beautiful. But this didn't happen because a culture dictated it. It happened because real people were in real places and doing real things. And we knew that Black Panther Party was in California. And not only was they, of course, the media, and as was depicted in the film, which is just amazing to me, as far as feeling what was happening at the time as a shorty, you know, looking at these individuals as intellectual. They went to college, yet and still they demanded they have a change. Yeah, they had that cool thing that everybody could relate to as elders and people to us as young people, but also the thing that fascinated me, and I guess also was a turnoff to the system, is that they had a high intellectual regard and also picked up on how do they do things instead of just talk about things. And that shocked everybody. And it was influential to me where it never rubbed off. So fast forward the Public Enemy, the formation of Public Enemy was in 1986. Now, I grew up in 1960, and all my guys around me, we grew up with this. We in New York, we was part of a program called the Afro-American Experience. In 1970 and 71, we went to this summer camp, and it was run by Panthers, people in the nation, just straight out young energy that said they wasn't going to, you know, fall for the status quo. And they taught us what we needed to teach, what we needed to learn. And people were bugging out when we went to the schools after the summer and was challenging in the 4th and 5th and 6th grade, like, nah, I don't know about that 1492 Columbus. How are you going to discover a spot that was already here? They were like, well, this ain't part of the curriculum. I mean, we got all these kids asking questions. So they stopped that program, but that stuff stayed with us. So we grew up in the formation of rap music and rap records. And we had the wherewithal, but we also had the longevity to say, well, we could take what we grew up with and put it into this thing that we do, because we love rap music. We love this and that, and we could add it all, the imagery, a combination from all these influential programs and parties, and the Black Panthers were woven into that aesthetic. So to see that Charisse, you know, actually did that thing in 5 months on that character, and also that Ebony considers the activism is the noise that she makes just with her defiance in falling for the status quo of what they say fashion is just something to take note. And that's what I'm saying. When we started Public Enemy, we took note from our background. We took note from that energy of that particular time. It's very important for people to take note of this particular time as it takes note from what already happened, because the future road and the future energy is going to be similar, but in a different way. It's going to be young energy, and we should take note to that. So that's where Public Enemy comes up out of. It recognized a full 360-degree thing. And that's what you do in culture and the arts. The arts is supposed to be a facsimile. It's a reflection of the movement, actuality of people doing real things in real time.
And you, so well said. And you touched a little bit on just the importance of knowing our history. But, you know, coming up in school, not all of us were taught about the Black Panther Party. But, you know, we've all seen so many references in pop culture to the Black Panther Party, to the Black is Beautiful movement, which you called out, Chuck, and, you know, Ebony, I'm sure you can speak to that as well. But do you all remember, like, the moment that you learned about the Black Panther Party and our history as it relates to this movement? Did you have a realization at some point? And if so, talk about that and how it inspired you, and in each of your different lanes, how it inspired your work. So Chuck, we can start with you, because I know you grew up in New York and you attended summer school with one of the free breakfast programs that were run by the Black Panthers. So you didn't even have to read about this.
I got that in real time. So the real time that was happening, it didn't happen in my particular neighborhood on Long Island, but when I went to my grandmother's house in Harlem, the Panthers had, you know, trucks with the lunch program coming down the street, and we waiting for the little apple juices and the little sandwiches that they got. So are we into the program? No, but this thing actually was implemented in Harlem to fill the void on pretty much an activist summertime for a lot of kids who had nowhere to go but the stoops in the building. So I participated. I was an inheritance of that, you know, movement. So that's what happened. The history of a particular time, you understand, at that time, the media was really truncated and limited. So anything that happened Black was told from a total other side of the story. You had two things that was in your pocket that taught you about what was happening Black. Number one, you had eye-to-eye, face-to-face with your people and your neighborhood and your family that told you what something was. And then you also had what was considered the best of our Black media at the time. And you cannot not talk about Ebony and Jet, which was headquartered and based in Chicago. And although people in hindsight might look back and say, oh, they were kind of like you know, a little conservative or whatever. That wasn't the case. Jet magazine, which later on became less and less content or substance, you know, and more style. Back in 1968, 69, 70, they had a gigantic editorial staff that spoke to the detail of something, whether they agreed with it or not. And this was very helpful. It came out every week. So if you lived in New York, you got the feedback of what was happening in Chicago, which already had a thick, you know, press, Defender, and all the magazines and newspapers of that city, in the Windy City. Then you had the Bay Area, where all of that energy of the Panthers was coming from. So we learned it in real time, but it was important for us to take what we learned in real time and to say, hey, you're not going to get this through your school systems. You're not going to get this through major media. They're not going to do a film about it to the 21st century. This is what you can get as your headline thing. So in the future or in the present, you can draw from it, or people could draw from it. We're going to use culture. And those were our loopholes to kind of bring that noise through.
That you talked about Black media and, you know, the role that Black media plays in chronicling our history and, you know, teaching, you know, our communities about what's really going on and the movements that are happening. And I'd like to say I started my career at Ebony Magazine. I just had to shout that out because you brought up, which is the headquarters was based in Chicago, same city that this film was based in.
Right.
Before we move on from you, you mentioned that you were in a school program where you were coming face to face with folks from the Black Panther Party in real time. You were getting the history lessons in real time. They must have been serving you more than apple juice. So is there one lesson or one memory that you can share with us from that time?
No, you know, it was a summer program that we was there for 2 years in the campus of Hofstra University in 1970 and 71. So you have people who knew that the agenda of the Panthers was not necessarily as the individual, but it was the collective. So I don't even remember the people's name. All I know that the agenda was to energize, motivate, and activate and do real things in real time. So we make no light, you know, of the activism of people, especially who gave their all, and really a lot of nameless situations. So even fast forward, right? We had a Fight the Power 2000, which actually, you know, the hip hop community, the older guard says, well, maybe this should be the theme of all this movement happening right last year. And then you had Rhapsody said a key line in it, you know, you love in Black Panther, but don't know Fred Hampton. And that one line in one statement shows that the power of the culture can actually illuminate and make people go, wow, let me dig into what this is. So the whole thing is that the movement and the energy and the commitment that people have put in to their movements of the Black Panther Party, Nation of Islam, or whatever, cannot be taken lightly from people that want to be able to have it as historical documented fact that we can use and process. So that was the beautiful aspect of just being involved and to, you know, shining light on it, and also watching the film and being able to say, yeah, I felt that, you know, I felt the major meat of the movie and what it was trying to convey and get across. And like I said, it was a good experience for me to be able. It's a great experience for us to build off of and not have it just being something that's a fashion statement.
Right. But those fashion statements and that imagery is important, and it's still important today. Ebony, I want to hear from you about this, you know, if you could chime in on this question as well. I mean, we talked about the Black is Beautiful movement and the fact that was rooted out of the Black Power movement. Talk about your there was a moment of awakening where you really came to learn about this and how it has influenced you in your career.
Yeah, for sure. The Black Panther movement isn't something that I learned about in school. Luckily, I had a great grandfather who had these community meetings every Sunday, and he invited everybody, whether you were on drugs or alcohol or homeless, like he invited all of these Black people to come sit in his living room every Sunday. And he would just preach this message of like back to Africa, community and togetherness. So I had this strong example of Blackness and what it meant to have pride in my Blackness. And, you know, I will admit that I was very influenced by the world outside of that. And so my self-esteem and my idea of myself was diminished because of the messaging and the programming and the media and things like that. But once I made the decision to go natural, I began to do my own research into the Black Panther movement, and my own research into Black is beautiful and Black power. And what I discovered is that it created this greater social context that I could put my own experiences into, which allowed me to have so much space for forgiveness and compassion for the people in my life, the things that they went through, the experiences that I went through as a result of growing up, not having a lot of money, not living with my mom, living with my dad, things like that. Because I could see how systemic those things were and how we were just really a product of the system and how the system was created for us to have those experiences. And that was very, very healing for me. So I think it's so important for us to know our history, to know how things are set up and why we have the experiences that we have, because it allows us to, reconstruct those bonds. It allows us to forgive. It allows us to just create space within ourselves to free ourselves and free those around us who we hold hostage with these expectations. So yeah, it was a huge part of my spiritual journey and just my own personal life journey to learn about the Black Panthers, the movement, and everything that's, put me in the position that I am today.
And I'm curious, because you grew up in a household where you were taught about, your history, you were taught about, cultural pride, and sounds like you were also taught about the Black Panther Party. So when you watched this film, was there anything that was new to you that you felt like you gleaned from the film that you hadn't been taught before?
I mean, absolutely. I just, the main message that I took away from the film is where there is people, there is power. And I think that's something I knew before, but the film really put a huge emphasis on that. And I think that's so important right now in this moment that we're in this time of change. There's so many people who are hungry for that. There's so many people who want that change, so many people who are ready for new evolution, new consciousness, and there's so much power. And I think we just have to awaken to it and recognize it, but it's definitely there.
Absolutely. So Charlize, we're going to end on you, sis. We started you are, your fingerprint is all over this film. You literally are living the dream of young Black stylist or, aspiring stylist. So leave us with kind of the essence of what this film meant to you, and what this experience working on a project like this has meant to you. And also I want to know your favorite look in.
Okay, I'll start with my favorite look because I feel like I'll get long-winded and then I won't get there. So I think my favorite look in the film is the scene where LaKeith, who plays O'Neill, goes to the warehouse and meets up with Mitchell, the FBI agent, and he has on this green fedora, and he really looks ridiculous and over the top to be having a informant meeting. And I think it just spoke to like his character and just how lost his character is, and it was just a really fun outfit to put together. And when he and I had so much fun in the fittings. I'm so happy with all of his changes, and I'm happy with what every single person wore in the film. But that one is, I think, my favorite because the green hat is just very symbolic of like capitalism and greed, money green. And it's just in this space that's very open. And so it's just a nice focal point and catches your eye in like the right way.
I want to ask as well, what you learned from the film, because you've done so much research. I mean, you've been living this in this era through your research, but when you sat back and got to watch your work play out on screen and watch the story, how it all came together in the final edit, is there anything that you learned that you didn't know before?
I mean, I would say I learned the entire time I was researching. You know, I knew about the Black Panther Party, but I was most familiar with the Oakland headquarters, you know, and the work that they did, the various, you know, protests that they had. You know, they went to the California state capitol and was there, you know, demonstrating the fact that there were open carry laws, and that forced, you know, the state to change those laws because it's Black people there with guns, right? And so I was very familiar with the work that they did, but I didn't know much about what Chairman Fred actually did in his life. And, you know, I think the biggest thing that I took away from the film is that, you know, you can impact so many people and enact a lot of change in a very short period of time. He was only the chairman of that party for about a year. Yeah, and he was very young. He was, you know, it was from the time I think he got the assignment around the time he was turning 20. He was like 19 or 20, and he passed after his 21st birthday. And so I think that is like the most impactful thing for me. And it's something that I took with me. You know, I have like been doing my own form of activism through fashion with children. I actually established a program while I was in Cleveland because I saw how disadvantaged, you know, the community was that we were shooting in. And I was like, I can't go to work every day in this community of Black people and not give back in some way. You know, I love my job. The industry a lot of times can be kind of parasitic in a way because we go to these places and we use up all the resources and then we leave, right? And I was like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So I think working on this project, learning what I learned about Chairman Fred's life and, you know, and the party and what was going on during that time, I was like, you don't need a lot to make a difference. You know, they didn't have a lot. They had each other and they put together what they had to feed children. You know, they put together the resources they had and came together with other poor communities and, you know, people of various races to, you know, make demands of the city of Chicago, right? So, you know, I think, you know, it's just really important for all of us to remember you don't need a lot.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I felt truly, like I said, I was 9 and 10 in 1969 and 70, and you brought me right back to that very moment. It's like I got uncles that was just like, you know, O'Neill and also Fred. I mean, I was looking at my uncles at that. And so, and it nailed the time from the car to the you know, cracking open and hot wiring it down to and you know, the 10-point program cannot also be overlooked. The fact that the Panthers, you know, they were high intellectuals that knew that they will change the law, but you got to know the law. And this was offensive to a country that just said, well, y'all shouldn't know this. And they do the same thing with younger energy today, saying like, y'all can't run nothing, you only 25. Well, Dr. King and Malcolm X were killed at 39. That was the OGs of that time, 39. So you have Fred Hampton, 21, Mark Clark, 2021. You know, the Panther Party in Chicago, you know, being the second, you know, hub, the place where they printed the papers and sent it out and, you know, for it to use. It was a connected network of young people, young adults, not kids, young adults that were influencing us kids. And they wanted that to stop. The same thing they're saying today, that, you know, in higher offices, you got to be 60, 70, 80 to have that job. So you telling a 22-year-old that they can't do it or they can't be that. And so, you know, what this does is at least it gives a timeline. Said this person's 21 years old and they activated. I could even look at my own past that me and my guys, when we started our career, although it's in culture, it wasn't actually in real things like, you know, real solid areas, but we were 26. So we were 26 and 27 years old. And today that's like, oh man, that, you know, you just barely getting, you know, could get in there. And now you get started when you're 40 years old. So we took that as a high note because revolution means serious change, 360 around, you know, the wheel. So I really appreciate y'all's activism and to make that, you know, it resonates. It resonated with me, you know, and it spoke to, you know, commitment to high intellect that it's hard to change things if you're not focused and paying attention and on point, and then also being bold about yourself. And my last note on the policing is just that the movie, the reason that, you know, the area of police disregarded this young energy because they didn't have a knowledge or understanding of what could come out about people. We demanded this change and the organization and collectivism of these situations. And the movie has showed how Fred Hampton got those organizations to be on the same page. That is always a threat when you collect and you mobilize and you unionize. So I thank y'all for that.
Well, I thank all of you for joining us all today and having this conversation. We could clearly go on and on. I feel like we just barely got into it, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. Everything that you guys shared was so valuable. Thank you for your work individually. And I hope that everyone watching makes it a point to watch this film, bring your kids, your nieces, make sure that the young people in your life are watching this film.
Bring your notebook.
Bring your notebook.
Jot your phone.
Yeah, jot your notes down. And it's an incredible story that is under discussed and undertold in our community. So get the word out. And thank you all again for tuning in. We will see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.